So that was a very uplifting presentation. There's a massive opportunity out here in this environment, not only for good, but for bad. And we can use a historical metaphor of Japan, of feudal Japan, to learn this lesson. In ancient Japan, basically, lords and shoguns themselves essentially deployed what's called nightingale floors so they could hear intruders as they bypassed their perimeter walls. Today's presentation is really exactly that. What kind of real opportunity exists in today's environment for you to earn greater revenues as it relates to securing the cloud? And from that, you need to become trusted advisors, not just salespeople in this endeavor. The attacks themselves have evolved beyond the viruses and malware of yesterday to the targeted attacks of today's infrastructures. And most importantly, of the 300,000 attacks that we see on a regular basis, today's presentation will focus on the top 5%. What can we learn from them? So we need to understand, back in the day, you had to code, you had to build the gun, you had to build the bullet before you shot someone. Now you can download the various weaponry that's widely available in the Eastern European, Brazilian, and Southeast Asian arms bazaars for a fee, for a price. Here's an example of how arrogant the community is. They give you service level agreements based on the effectiveness on their attack code to bypass McAfee, Symantec, or Trend Micro products. They're well aware of the weaknesses in the perimeter defenses of firewalls, encryption, and anti-malware to protect against today's threats. And many of these hackers have been insulated by regimes because they're seen to be national assets. You're seeing this phenomenon with the patriotic hacking coming out of Eastern Europe targeting major businesses as we speak, as well as the non-state actor groups that have become directly empowered from ISIS to Al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula. Here's an example, though. They want the latest and greatest, just like your customers want the latest and greatest technology sets. You can lease the relevant technology sets in today's environment to pull off an attack, even if you are not a programmer, for less than $300. And you can do that using 10 stolen credit cards that you could buy in a various forum from the various escapades against Target or Home Depot. This is the demonstrative of the economy of scale that exists on the dark side. With prosecution rates less than 5% for cybercrime, why wouldn't you get in this game? And again, the purpose of this presentation is to make you the trusted advisor to your clients, to increase your capacity to sell security to their cloud arrangements. So what can we learn about the stratagems of elite hackers? How can we spin the chessboard? How many of you actually play chess? So it's about creating a knight's fork. That's when you force your enemy to give up their queen in order to maintain a presence in the game. It's not just about spear phishing. Although 92% of the attacks are viable because of spear phishing, we need to pay attention to the other 8% of viable attacks that have bypassed yesterday's security technologies. So what are they? So in order to understand them, we need to understand that there is an entire kill chain of attack. Lockheed Martin coined this phrase when they first termed the APT threat, which was the massive threat targeting US government agencies when the US government lost their 3 greatest national secrets, which were ICBMs capable of delivering multiple nuclear bombs, nuclear warheads, stealth technology, and Trident missile capabilities from submarines. But why is this important? We need to appreciate that another stage has been added to this kill chain, a maintenance stage. The hackers want to colonize your infrastructure. They don't just break in to steal or destroy. They literally patch the holes they've exploited. They literally move to secondary command and controls, and they trade the footprints in your ecosystems to other hackers and leverage those own systems for sale in the wild, just like they do credit cards. They also leverage techniques that allow them to bypass sandboxes, to bypass technologies like FireEye. Many of the most prolific attacks in the environment of today were custom built to bypass the security defenses that were put in place because they have done tremendous reconnaissance on you. They know your networks, your customer networks, better than they know themselves. And it's from that perspective that we need to tip our hats, but also spin the chessboard. Now, Sony dealt with this. Yes, rob your house, then burn it to the ground, from a cyber context. But this is becoming mainstream in conversations and activities in Europe and Asia as we speak. Hackers are not just penetrating networks to steal your intellectual property, to steal the confidential customer info, the PII at all, but they're actually leveraging destructive payloads to destroy IT infrastructure so they can inhibit the capacity of your organization, your partners, your supply chain to react to an event. And why not? I mean, we learned this from organized crime back in the day, burn the body. This is exactly what's happening in the environment. So as we discuss the Internet of Things and the Internet of Everything, we need to understand and appreciate that if you build it, they will come, but they will not all be righteous. To illustrate that fact, as Interpol's security partner, last year it was denoted there was a 10% decrease in street crime. Is that because more people are going to church? That's because more street crime, more street criminals are recognizing and appreciating the high reward and low risk of entering into the cyber game. So what are the attack vectors of today? So 28% of the world's watering holes are US websites. What that means is just like the crocodile and the lion hunt the wildebeest at a watering hole in Africa, it's the same concept. Specific pages within your website, specific mobile apps that you've leveraged to your consumer base have been polluted. And anyone who visits them gets malware shoved down their browser's throats. This has become more and more of a dynamic phenomenon, and it also allows us to understand there is a nexus here between security, sustainability, and brand protection. All chief marketing officers need to be allocating greater budgets to the protection of their websites, to the protection of their mobile apps, not just releasing them and having production timelines. Also, as it directly relates to this audience, we are all part of a value chain, a supply chain that's being inherently attacked by the adversaries because we deliberately post who our partners are, who our outside general counsels are, who our biggest customers are. And they know if you have sufficiently protected your infrastructure, they can go after someone in your supply chain to what's called island hop from that infrastructure into yours. Look at Target, pretty good security. But most importantly, it was the air conditioning repairman's computer that was leveraged purposefully to attack that Fortune 100 organization. And as for mobile, we just heard about the wonders and the ubiquity of mobile, and many of you are looking at your mobile devices right now. We also need to appreciate that just like mobile attacks have evolved, there are 4.6 million pieces of malware out there for Android users. If you are an Android user right now and you're not using anti-malware, you've probably already been owned. What makes it more specifically problematic is this. When I hack your mobile device, when they automate this attack, I can leverage proximity settings, turning on the microphone, the video camera, specific to calendar settings or location settings. And for those of you who have left Bluetooth on because you drove here, you can now be hopped into by someone sitting next to you that accidentally downloaded some malware at the airport yesterday. This is the problem. It's the concept and the focus of the adversary wanting to maintain omniscience. And whether or not you think you're going to be targeted, it's your best customers and the most powerful people you know that will be targeted through you. What is also more problematic, not just the North Korea attack on Sony, is that geopolitics truly have become a harbinger for cyber attack. Okay? I don't just say this with an epiphany of someone working for a global cybersecurity company. I sit on a commission on cybersecurity for the president and regularly advise people in certain communities who care about this phenomenon. And this has become more and more pervasive. Here's why. The best hackers in the world for a long time have been allowed to maintain an untouchable-like character within their own cultures so long as they never hack the regime, so long as they never hack any corporations within the sovereign boundary, so long as they share information of relative use to the regime, and lastly, so long as they, when tapped on the shoulder, they act in a patriotic fashion against the adversaries of the state. And we've seen this. We've seen this all over the world. Most importantly, we're seeing this in the former Soviet bloc right now against NATO and US interests. There's a fascinating study, which we don't have time to go through today, called Operation Pawn Storm, that really describes an uptick of a significant campaign of robust attacks against US energy, financial, government agencies, and defense industrial base, ever since we leveraged the first stage of economic sanctions against Russia in June. This is becoming highly problematic because the intent of this campaign is to burrow deeply within these infrastructures, maintain a persistent presence, to not only steal relative sensitive information, but to maybe someday leverage destructive payloads should necessary, given the state of geopolitics today. This was also a three-staged attack. They hunted the users because they knew all of them, specifically, who had been successfully penetrated, had attended a conference like this. And they'd received the next day's agenda via email, and that agenda was polluted. And then, subsequent to compromising those people's devices, they compromised the websites, turn them into watering holes of those subsequent users, and then anyone who visited those sites specific to reference to this conference were then backdoored with malware targeting iOS devices. And this is just an example of a staged, leveraged campaign of attack, much like a chess game. So what are the impacts here? It's not just operational costs and strategic costs. Most importantly, it's about reputational risk. It's about brand protection. How can you become somewhat of a trusted advisor to your future clients to endow them with some sort of awareness that it's about sustainable cloud migration? Sustainable cloud migration will never be achieved solely through encryption. It'll never be achieved with traditional cybersecurity defenses based on these threats. We have 1,200 threat researchers dedicated to looking at this problem, 1/5 of our workforce, and we just see it getting more and more nefarious. So how do we do this? So first, we have to respect the fact that offense has to inform defense. The future of attacks in today's world will be iOS attacks. Why? Because iPay's here. Why not? The best hackers in the world have been hunting the financial sector for years, and now they're going to turn their guns on iOS, and you're seeing more and more of that with iWorm and the attacks, the viable attacks on Safari, and the use of watering hole attacks to target mobile users. In addition, 0 days for web apps and web application attacks are continuing to explode, as are secondary infections because we do a terrible job of cleaning out the rats in our houses once they're gone. Rats is actually a technical term for remote access terminal. Ransomware is migrating now to mobile devices because traditional criminals understand there's some way of monetizing the fact that you can encrypt someone's phone and they need it the next day, and they're willing to pay you money for that access. 3 police precincts in Pennsylvania recently paid ransom to hackers because all of their devices were encrypted with ransomware. And this is just a sign of the times. And the use of destructive payloads to either punish because of geopolitics or to inhibit your capacity to respond to events will become mainstay. So the key issue is that we continue, those of us who do care about security, to try to build a castle in the sky. It's flawed. The architecture of a castle is flawed. It's not going to apply to this environment. We need to move to more of an architecture of that of a prison. One of the great prisons of the world is actually located in Florence, Colorado, the ADX Supermax prison, developed in 1994 with the help of human psychologists to make it a control cell unit prison so that the criminal never knows where they are within that facility. They move between cell blocks by tunnels. They see the sky every day directly above them, but they don't see the landscape. And there's multiple rings of defense from the inside out. That's what we need to achieve in cybersecurity. It begins with advanced malware detection for not just your traditional infrastructures, but for things like cloud apps. It doesn't just sit there, though. You need to understand, what does that have to do with me? If the burglar is in my house, how does that relate to? How does that relate to the van that's constantly parked across the street? And that has to do with contextual threat intelligence. You can't just understand if someone's in your house and presume it's one individual, one hacker, one command and control in today's environment. So, we've developed something for this. We've developed it for cloud apps. Deep discovery is our capability for discovering these phenomena in networks, and cloud app security in our partnership with Ingram is really what we're trying to achieve vis-a-vis apps. But most importantly here, I want to give you a 12-step program to solve this problem without being technologically prescriptive. First and foremost, we have to scrimmage. Those of us who enjoy sports, how do we pertain to act in an environment where we don't even scrimmage? That's why penetration testing is fundamental. We need to hack ourselves before the adversary does. We need to understand how we're going to react. What are the viable attack paths? Two-factor authentication is here to stay. It's important, especially for your systems engineers, your systems administrators. We need a host-based intrusion prevention system as we move to more and more VDI implementations, hybrid and public clouds. We need file integrity monitoring. We necessitate a breach detection system. But most importantly, that has to relate to context of threat intelligence that's global in nature. And we need to be able to sandbox our cloud apps and deploy alternative DLPs to the ones that exist, given the state of play, and given the focus on the adversary to colonize our infrastructure and exfiltrate our credentials. So I'll leave you with a quote from Victor Hugo, which is, "Not all the armies of the history of the world can stop an idea whose time has come." And that idea, my friends, is really the security of the cloud through sustainable layered security. And I hope this all rewards you with financial gains this year. Thank you for your time.